Good morning. My name is Kevin Altsvold. It's been a little while since I've been a service associate, and so thanks for loaning me an ear. I realize you're here by choice, so if you get up and leave, I'll understand. But it's an honor to have your ear here for a bit. Today, you're gonna hear a lot about parenting, and I suspect it's a topic that you're familiar with. Are there any parents that are here who have been a parent? Or maybe have just seen a parent super stressed out? Probably a few. I happen to be qualified in this topic because my wife, Kate, and I have two kids, two amazing kids. Margot, who's 3 years old. She has a T at the end of her name. It's a secret T. Don't say the T. Lewis is her big brother listening to headphones this morning, I think. He's smiling. Everyone's looking at him now. He doesn't have any secret letters, just secret talents. So don't underestimate him. By the birthright of my children, I'm qualified to talk about being a parent. I'm not very qualified to give any advice whatsoever on being a parent. It's our first time, after all. When Lewis came, it was our first time being parents. I remember that drive pretty well coming back home. They just let us have them. Hardly any paperwork, no approvals. It was expensive, and I don't even think we got a receipt. Then Margot was born, and it was, again, a first time. It was the first time we were parents of two kids. They just let us have her, too. Then Lewis turned 6. It was our first time having both a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, both at the same time. Then Margot turned 3, and it was our first time having both a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. Few people know this, but tomorrow I will be 41. And thank you. And it's my first time being a 41-year-old, having two kids, both 3 and 6, on a Monday in February. It's a school day. First time. Not sure what's going to happen. What I mean to offer in this is that I have no idea what I'm doing. Each decision and day, it's for the first time. No qualifications, no training. I hardly get any feedback. Well, that's useful at least. And although I'm a grown-up, I've been working a long time to be a grown-up, I still am I am not in control of what happens in our day. This dad job is stressful. I knew it was going to be. I knew it was going to be hard. I just didn't really expect it was going to be this hard. And if I were to be fully honest, I couldn't say that I always like being a parent. I mess up a lot. And 9 times out of 10, I get negative feedback to my actions. And there is always red sauce. Somewhere, there's always red sauce, and I hate red sauce mess. A few things keep me going, and I listed here 4, and these are my experiences, which are different than your experiences. I was expecting to like pour my soul out, only to realize that this was only my experiences and none of yours. But the first is that you might think that you have the best mom in the world. And that's like a really sweet thing for you to offer. I'm sorry, you're wrong. Our kids have the best mom in the world. Kate is the most I could ever dream in being a partner. Planning is her love language. She is incessantly fixated on offering the most for our kids, all while teaching warmth, love, honesty, patience, boundaries, and compassion. She approaches this constructively, piece by piece, day by day. And because it's our first time, she pivots, readjusts, and lays into the next day as though it's new. I learned so much from her and strive to keep up. She gives, and gives, all while looking amazing and excelling in a career that demands even more of her from other kids, probably with red sauce somewhere. My two kids are so lucky they'll realize that someday. Number two, this is my job, and I'm not just going to give up. Spending time asking if I like being a parent is like being chased by a bear for 3 minutes and then sitting down to wonder if I like being chased by a bear. Why does it matter, dude? That bear is going to make a mess out of you, and you better keep running. Okay, maybe that wasn't the best analogy, but hey, this is my job, and I'm going to make the most of it. Number three, Kate and I have lots of support around us, people who listen to our problems, people who have dropped off a meal during some really tough weeks, and people who love us and our kids. And number four, I do think that we're getting better. I say this very cautiously, but I have picked up a few things along the way. Kate's picked up a few things, and I hope that as time passes and we all get older, it'll get easier. So for this morning, you're not going to hear any advice coming from me. I'm not qualified to offer that to you, but you are going to hear us talking a lot about the stress of doing this job. We're also going to offer some awareness of a recent study that was offered and released by the U.S. Surgeon General called Parents Under Pressure. Inside the study, there are some national statistics, which might be a little bit alarming, hard to listen to. For example, 41% of parents say that most days they are so stressed that they cannot function. And 48% say that most days their stress is completely overwhelming compared to other adults who might provide feedback of 20% or 26% respectively. But don't worry, the report also offers some concrete actions and opportunities for us to support each other in what can be approached as a sacred responsibility. So come, let us listen.
A handle right here on top. What's inside there? It's a book. Excellent. You can come have a seat, friend. So kids, you might have heard some things that might have sounded sad or overwhelming, or you might see your grown-ups looking a little sad or overwhelmed. And so I wanted to share this story because my sincere hope, like the author of this book, Hillary Clinton, is that you do feel like you have a village. Do you guys feel like you have a village around you? Yeah. What's part of your village? This place. I love hearing that. What else is part of your village? Maybe we'll have some more ideas as we go along. Let's see. Sometimes it takes a child to make a village. We all have a place in the village, a job to do, and a lot to learn. Do we all have a lot to learn? Yeah, even grown-ups. As Kevin was just saying, kids don't come with instructions, but I bet you feel this way. Neither do grown-ups. You wish there were some instructions on how to handle your grown-up? Every child needs a champion, or two, or three, or more. And the right tool to get the job done. Every family needs help sometimes. Kindness and caring and sharing matter. Playing matters too. Can I get a yay for that? Yeah. We all need to play. And resting. Can I get an amen on that one? And you know what's hard for us grown-ups sometimes is you all don't want to rest. And when you get to be grown-ups, you're going to go, why don't they want to rest? But because the world is in a hurry, but children are not. You ever get told to hurry up? Yeah. So maybe adults, we can learn to slow down. The village needs every one of us to help and every one of us to believe in each other. Do you think we can do that? Children are born believers. You agree? Yep. Full of hope and optimism. And you're citizens too. Let us build a village worthy of all children. And you can see here they built this beautiful playground, and they have a beautiful cherry blossom tree, it looks like, and a garden and benches and room for bicycles, places for everybody to be. And I hope that we might be able to think, what? Yeah, sure. Everybody. Yeah, everybody means everybody, right? And everybody and all of us. So I want you to think as you go into your classes today about how we can build that village. What do we need? What are the tools we need? And how might you dream and imagine that village? And how this place is part of that village, and how these people, because it's not just a place, right? It's the people that make the village happen. So we're going to sing our children out to their classes. As Kevin alluded to, we really could spend a lot of time on this document, and we only have a limited time here. We also want this to feel like a worship service and not a lecture. But if you'll bear with me, I do have a few slides to show you that have a few key takeaways about the Surgeon General's advisory. Okay, there we go. I think one of the most important things is we still have a U.S. Surgeon General at the moment. And so this came out at the end of the year, when parents are just going, woo, we made it through another year. A lot of the different data and things in there will show that this has affected families. We are hitting a critical point. That's the point to take away. If you take away nothing else, we are at a critical time. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But here's just a few takeaways from the advisory. Next slide, Marty. 1 in 4 U.S. parents said that there have been times in the past year when they did not have enough money for basic needs. I have seen this in front of me play out in a grocery store. People put things back. Sometimes I've been in the opportunity to step in and pay for things. People shouldn't be having to make the decision about whether they can afford basic things like diapers and milk. There's been a lot of mutual aid that came out of the pandemic, and it's not enough. We have to mind the gaps. And to think that this isn't happening in our community here at UCCI, to think it's not happening in our schools, it is. So I just need to say that for people to understand. One of my other jobs, for people who don't know outside of here, is I work in a daycare. And I see the cost of that, the financial cost of these parents. But I also see, I'm working with 5-month-old to 15-month-olds, and they are with me more of their waking hours than they are with their parent. I cannot imagine the toll that is taking. I was very fortunate that I had a lot of flexibility, like Kevin was saying, in those early years. So that's really important for us to understand that impact. And the childcare costs keep going up. Cost of food keeps going up. All of those things are going up. Nearly 70% of parents, 70, say parenting is now more difficult than it was 20 years ago, with children's use of technology and social media as the 2 top cited reasons. I know Kevin's getting into this in his reflection, and I'll get into it in mine. Those devices that are in our homes, in their schools at very early ages. And even if you're the parent who says, I'm not bringing that in until a certain age, It's out. Your kid's going to come in contact with it in ways that are outside of your control. First, when I was a kid, well, this person had TV or didn't have TV. Now, like the kid they walk with for 5 minutes could show them something. It's a very different world. And Reverend Nick and I even talk about that, just 10 years difference in where our kids are. And I'm still actively parenting and dealing with this. So that's huge. Next slide, Marty. In 2023, so this is not like very outdated. This is 2 years ago, not even. 33% of parents reported high levels of stress in the past month compared to 20% of other adults. One of the things that happened, this was high before COVID. We cannot blame this all on COVID. COVID definitely exacerbated a lot. It definitely sped up burnout, sped up timelines, sped up things like there. I remember a quote at one point, I don't work from home, I live at work. Ooh, some of us feel that. Yeah. So those high levels of stress and this feeling, like Kevin was saying, we're supposed to, I'm a grown up, I'm supposed to know all the stuff. I feel like I'm lifeguarding a pool. I have not been trained to be a lifeguard. I've been given no tools and just, a whistle and, one little buoy. That's a lot. And there's all these other extrapolating factors that I can't control. And I'm dog paddling, right? And most of the people in the pool are doggy paddling. Nearly 3 in 4 parents are extremely or somewhat worried that their child will struggle with anxiety or depression. This is not the world many of us thought we would be raising children in 2025. And this was out before that, just to frame. So we're going to spend some time, Kevin and I, especially from our different vantage points, because not everybody may have the opportunity to sit down with someone who's actively parenting and hear and understand and listen with whole hearts to what we have to share. Kevin and I hope that you receive what we have to share today with open hearts and open minds and with curiosity. There are amazing, wonderful things about parenting. There are things that don't maybe stress Kevin and I, things that are different. And there are also so many commonalities, no matter which life stage you are as a parent, a grandparent, an auntie, an uncle, a trusted adult, whoever you may be in that village for our kids. I ask you to open your mind and think about that today as you hear what we have to share. Kevin?
I think it was maybe a couple weeks ago. I went to go pick Lewis. Oh, Lewis isn't here. That's nice. I was a little feeling like odd that I was going to talk about him, and I'm glad that he can't hear. Unless he's online. So I went to go pick up Lewis, and I happened to be listening to a hip hop song. It was a song by Jay-Z, and it had explicit warnings on the album. And I later checked on Spotify, if you looked on the songs of that album, and everyone had that little E sign due to its foul language and adult content. Sorry, Mom. And so Lewis hopped in the car, and he's been building a list of his favorite songs. You saw him with his headphones on this morning. It brings him a lot of peace to walk around our house and listening to his music and kind of singing along to his favorite jams. When he got in, he asked if he could add that song to his playlist, and I said, "You can't do that. There's some bad words on that song." And he said, "Oh, which ones?" And since it was my first time being a parent of a 6-year-old, I could only muffle something about all of them and then remind him to put on his seatbelt. It's a small moment, and yeah, it's kind of a silly one and lighthearted, but I don't know how to be a parent. That's not true. What I mean to say is I don't know what I'm doing. And I find that super stressful to wake up at a job and have no rule book or performance metrics at the end of the year and not have an employee manual, right? Um, and so we're talking through a little bit of identifying those stressors. Again, it's my experience or it's Adrian's experience or your own experience as you're dwelling on this and not that of everybody else's. Um, we've reached a lot of challenges and we do our best with what energy and information we have on that moment and never know if it's the right thing, finding ourselves saying, I don't know what to do. These are a few things that are stressful to me. Screen time. It's a huge motivator for us. We use it as a reward and it's highly regulated. But I feel kind of stuck that I wish it would just somehow just disappear due to all the drama that it exists. And our kids are young, so what they're faced with is truly quite locked down, and I can only worry about the future when those locks become less and less. Another item is food, and I say this with living a life of privilege that I had this expectation that if we really stuck to our guns about the food that they ate, if we closed out and somehow blindfolded them to things like Fruit Loops and fruit by the foot, that they just wouldn't know it existed and be happy eating their vegetables. Daycare, school lunches, fast food stops, commercials, whatever it was, seems to have snuck up on us. And while we talk so much about food pyramids and balanced eating, it's just so stressful every single day to find the stuff they'll eat that's good for them and have it available at the right time with the right colored plate, not touching each other, sitting at the right chair, blah, 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 blah. I'm super grateful. And I don't want to say this again, belittling the struggles that others have. It's a privilege to offer them what food as opposed to food. But it doesn't mean that for us, it's not a daily cause of stress. Another item, screen time. Did I mention screen time is stressful? Another item is safety, right? And too much safety. I want my kids to be tough, but it's so hard for me to find the balance of when to let go and when to hover. I heard an expression recently of doing dangerous things carefully, and I'm doing my best to put that into practice. Independence can somehow be an inverse correlation to safety at times. I want them to have exposure to uncomfortable situations while at the same time giving them some tools to remain safe. Another stressor of mine is sleep. We work so long on getting our critters to bed and to stay in bed. Goodness, why won't they just go to bed? Another stressor is just we deal sometimes, especially in public places, of what other people think of us. Advice can be helpful sometimes. I get it. And am grateful for when that happens. But my kid is so different from your kid. Just settle down. These are some things that are hard on me as a person. Sleep. I'm tired. I feel like I just can't get enough of sleep. And granted, again, in a good place. And sometimes we have it better than others. But when your sleep is interrupted over the course of many years, a few times a night, you might get used to accepting it, but it's hard. Regret. I carry a big load of regret around with me. One night, it was a cold, rainy night, and we wanted to give the kids some exercise by going for a walk before getting back in the car that we had a long drive in front of us. I offered because my son was, I was going to not name my son. You know who my son is. He's not here. It's okay. Unless he's on the internet. We were going to go for a walk. He was slowing down a little bit. And so I offered a piggyback ride. Being that it was rainy and I didn't have a firm grip, things were feeling uncomfortable and I stopped to set him down on a bench. And I still don't know exactly what happened, but as I set him down, he lost his footing, slipped and fell and smacked his head on the corner of this bench. Being that it was in the head, the blood was everywhere, and it was pretty dramatic. We hurried back trying to find a hospital and then navigated the many hours endeavor of getting stitches. It was all my fault. I screwed up. I wish I could go back and do something different. Judging the past version of me for not being more patient, drawing more pliable boundaries and compromises, not spending so much time worrying about fill in the blank. I wish I hadn't fought so many principle battles. It never seemed to have helped. Another item is gratitude, or the lack of gratitude coming from our kids. I would be happy to give you $1, anybody $1, each time I heard my kids had said, "Hey, Dad, thanks for getting us to bed on time." Or overheard someone say, "Mom, thank you. Thank you so much. I know that my science project isn't due for another month. Thank you for helping me every step of the way." It can be exhausting to always be the bad guy who puts an end to fun, pesters them to sit down while eating or not scratching the floor or don't leave the lights on, blah, blah, blah. So I feel like I'm bringing the energy down really low here, guys. Sorry. I didn't really like piece that together until I sat here and listed it out. But I do want to bring some awareness, and Adrian thought that it would be helpful to raise some of these items of awareness. And this report itself, I encourage you to read. Granted, it's maybe not the most exciting thing that you've done, but it's helpful. Two major items within the report that I felt were helpful to just identify in regards to this topic of stress on parents and what that impact it has to their ability to take care of their kids in this community. One item that I brought out, financial worries are a major stress among parents compared to other adults. 66% of parents reported feeling consumed by worries regarding money, compared to 40% of other adults in 2023. Further, 1 in 4 parents, which we read up on the screen, said there have been times in the past year when they did not have enough money for basic needs. A further report referenced the study illustrated the correlation between these worries and parental depression, anxiety, and stress. The other item that I thought would be helpful to voice is time. We're in a good place where Kate and I have some flexibility to be around our kids, and it's hard to imagine families who are not in that same situation. What the report identifies is that the trend of the amount of time that parents are spending parenting continues to increase. At the same time, the time that parents are spending in work continues to increase. I don't think it was referenced in the report, but the amount of time that the earth spins and the sun does its thing hasn't changed. And maybe it has. Don't like fact check me on that. But what I mean to say is that the impact of that results in less time for self-care and quality time with one's partner. For our 2 young children, we haven't even tried to start explaining the broader challenges of this year, this month, why 77 million people recently voted in favor of repression, lawlessness, violence against women, and underrepresented groups of people. That's going to be a bit harder to explain than some Jay-Z song lyrics. So my kids are a little bit young. Adrian's going to offer maybe some expression a little later in the surface about her experiences as well.
All right. So for those who don't know me and my family situation, I have a 20-year-old, soon to be 21, how can that be, daughter who lives in Chicago, and I have an 18-year-old who lives in Mississippi, daughter, and a newly minted 15-year-old son. So again, like Kevin, this is the first time I'm doing all this, right? I'm navigating, I'm at a different life stage, but I remember our very first daughter being born, and we were in Mississippi at the time, and they had a very strange rule that you could not be asleep in the room while the baby was there. And yeah, in 2 days, like, you're going to let me go home and I'm going to sleep while this baby's here. It seems like this would be a safe time to practice that. But alas,
So it's just those things that you relate to, no instructions, right? I think back on those things. And so I try not to offer too much advice with parents younger than me, but more witness. I remember the days are long, but the years are short. And those days can feel really long. It can feel like there's 30 hours in them. It's kind of like when you're parenting, every day is like January. Yeah. Those days just feel that way a lot. Um, but yeah, now we're having to navigate things like financial aid, which is now under threat at different institutions. We're having to bridge gaps of like how to be an adult, how to be in an adult child relationship. And some of the things we had to navigate also were like choosing to stay in a faith community or to find a new faith community, right? A lot of that's changed in the short amount of time. I've watched how, like, as we empowered our children to have technology, well, what does that mean? And how do we talk about that? And y'all know I'm the biggest advocate for our whole lives. And I will tell you again and again, our whole lives sexuality education was one of the most critical things for our children. And we think it's all about tab A and slot B and health and this. And it is so much about relationships. And when my oldest kiddo was navigating some really tricky things, navigating medical crisis, navigating boundaries with roommates, even now as a resident assistant, navigating having to be on call when someone's maybe not making the best choices. Those things she learned in communities like this empowered her to say, I can do this and I can't do that. That's my line. We're giving her generational wealth rather than generational trauma. Let that sink in. A lot of us are dealing with trauma, lowercase t, capital T. But have we taken a moment to take a step back and think how we can be setting our kids up to be ahead of the game, so to speak? How are we putting those tools that every child needs into their backpack, right? And those are really key elements too. I am going to brag for a tiny second. That same child was just in the Chicago Tribune as part of a unionizing for the resident assistants that she's been leading for 2 years. Why? Because she said, I know my worth. I've had trusted adults in my community. And she rallied other people to find community. Why? Because that's what she's seen. That's what she knows. And she could do that. She didn't do it alone. She had this great cohort of people to do that with. And things might change. Illinois state law might change as a result of these young people. Like, the kids are hard, but they're okay. The kids are all right. And that's because we pour so much of who we are into our kids. And I'm not just saying that as a parent. I'm saying the teachers, the school bus drivers. My school bus driver, Mr. B, was one of the bright, shining lights in my life. And I fortunately had him as a bus driver all the way from kindergarten through high school in different capacities. And if I was on Mr. B's bus, I felt safe. I felt loved and I felt cared for. So do not dismiss those little tiny opportunities to show those acts of compassion. My middle child, my husband argues it's because she's my mini me and we're a lot alike. And I said, well, great, you're well versed. Wrap all your appendages around her and take a Dramamine and buckle up for the ride. But she too has taught me things. You know, one of the things Kevin was talking about, how do we measure? How do we know we're doing okay? Well, I can tell you, my kids feel like they can fall apart at home. By gosh, is that hard? Is it exhausting and draining? 110%. But do I know I'm doing a good job if they feel like they don't have to mask and put on airs and be perfectionists and performative and they can fall apart? Yeah. And I mean, this just happened over Christmas, right? Two oldest get in a little thing. And I turn to my husband, I'm like, I have no spoons left tonight, just so you know. But I'll loop you in tomorrow about what's happening. And realistically, we still need that. Part of the things I learned, again, from being an AL facilitator, skin hunger. One of the things they talk about in the report is isolation. This happens to us all across the lifespan that we feel isolated. But I remember having an aha moment that, my 7-year-old was starting to get more self-conscious about wanting to climb in my lap or those sorts of things. But the 3-year-old could, just climb in my lap and pour on sugar and would still wear me like a skin blanket if he could. And realizing she didn't have language. She didn't know that's what she needed. So back then I started thinking about, well, can we snuggle up and read in my bed together? And that's a way that it's not babying her, but she feels that connection. And I tell you, these kids now, they still 20 and 18 and 15, and one's 5'11 and a half, they need the snuggles. They just need to snuggle up with their mom sometimes. Their dad has a different love language with them. And that's another thing I just say is teaching kids the language. Anybody here as a kid have what are your 5 love languages? Did anyone here learn that as a kid? No, I didn't. I was raised by parents who, you have feelings, we're just going to push that down. We'll talk about that later. We were meant to be seen and not heard. My kids, we've already started to theorize about what your love languages are. These are things you might look for in friends, future partners, and you're all different. Guess what? But also recognizing that in the parents, me and my husband are different about that. But here we are. We've got 2 in college, another one getting ready to head to college. My husband is a working professional and also has anywhere from 3 to 5 side hustles at a time. I've piecemealed together 3 part-time jobs with sometimes a side hustle so that I can be the primary parent. We're now navigating into a situation where my husband can be a little bit more the primary parent. But all of that is exhausting. And a lot of that is invisible labor that people do not see. And we just have to be aware and be curious and lean into going, things are rapidly changing. And that shouldn't be a hard shift for us because things with children are always rapidly changing, right? They liked Go-Gurts last week, and by gosh, they won't touch it this week. Their favorite fruit was bananas, so bananas were on sale. Bananas are dead to me. That was so 3 days ago, right? And it changes. So if it's changed this much for me as a parent in 10 years from where my kids were at Kevin's kids' age, how much has it changed for many of us here today, or even since we were parented, right? The other day I found out we had a soccer practice that night at 11:30 in the morning while I was at the State House, that we had a 5 o'clock practice to be to. So parents who aren't actively parenting right now, that's what we're saying when we can't plan. No, I have no idea what's happening. I don't. And like Kate, I'm a planner. So I plan as much as I can for everything that I can, so that when those things require me to pivot, which if I've mentioned before, I hate that word now, I can try to gracefully and with a smile pivot. And I feel like we should get like awards and like little leveling up. That would help in our merit measuring, right? Like we got little badges, like I adulted today, or if you took the kids to back to school shopping, when you got clothes, it made like a video game leveling up noise. It would be great. It would help parental morale. So we could go on and on and on. But I hope just sharing a little bit of what each of us are going through might be relatable. Those of you who are grandparents, aunties, trusted adults, think about some of what we're saying. I invite you now to join us in a moment of silence. This hymn that we just sang, We Are, has a beautiful origin story. This is from the UUA Song Information page. It's the last song in a suite that begin with the lyric, Lord, it's midnight, a dark and fear-filled midnight. Lord, it's midnight without stars. Dr. Barnwell wanted to create a complete circle of experience, and so she wrote, for each child that's born, a morning star rises. This phrase is meant to establish hope. It defines the uniqueness of each one of us. No matter what our race, culture, or ethnicity, each one of us has been called into being and are the sum total of all who came before. In the composer's words, each and every one of us stands atop a lineage that has had at its core mothers and fathers, teachers and dreamers and shamans and healers and builders and warriors and thinkers and. So in spite of our uniqueness, we come from and share every experience that humankind has ever had. In this way, we are one. Woo. That's the best thing I could find to sum up raising children as sacred work. It should matter to all of us. All of us are invested in the hope that children bring, in the joy that children bring, in the love that children bring, how they bring people together, how we touch their lives for just a brief moment in time, and it matters. And in turn, they touch our lives. You know, you learn why this moth is here, or get fascinated with a slug, or in the busy times get encouraged to stop and literally smell flowers, right? And find the beauty in a weed. They can teach us, and we can learn, and we can learn and teach them. So how can we build a village? I'm going to be honest, I've had several conversations with colleagues. We're not sure. Okay. But what I'm hoping is this is going to help us peel back the curtain, invite people to gather in conversation, to say this is important. Ways we've done things aren't working anymore. Let's be honest, sometimes they weren't working that well to begin with. But let's look at it. How can we do that? So while everyone says it takes a village or a community to raise children, they aren't built in anymore. There's all these different reasons, right? A big thing being capitalist society, and people are in a gig economy and have to move to where the work is. Part of it is people are undoing generational harm and not staying with family that is continuing to hurt them. So they are seeking out family in new ways. This community often behaves like a family. I've witnessed it. I've heard people share stories about that. Now you have to be careful. You could be the family member they avoid on the holiday. Woo, that's a hard truth, isn't it? Or you could be the family member, I have to go today because I'm so excited to see so-and-so, and just give them a hug. I know they're having a hard time. I'm excited to see these kids because I haven't seen them in a while, and I bet they've grown a foot, right? Those are the ways we can be like family. And even though the number of multi-generational households has quadrupled over the past 5 decades, they still only make up 17% of all households. So that invisible work of creating community and maintaining that relationship also falls to women. So those guys who are out there today, thank you for being here. And thank you for being part of this community. And if you missed last week when Nick was talking about some of this, I invite you to go back and listen. I think there are many ways. We're now in a stage, some of us are doing work with the board to imagine 2030. What are the next 5 years going to hold? And let's be honest, right now in these times, it's good to be looking forward with some hope and optimism at some concrete, actionable things we can do. So get close to families, check in on them. Hey, you just crossed my mind. I just want to see how you are. Hey, would you care if I just watch them while they're outside with chalk and bubbles so you can stay here and talk to the other parents you're clearly enjoying having time with? Those are little invitations, little ways you can offer help and guidance. And also to parents and caregivers, help is not a dirty word. I have to say it all the time to myself. It's not, and no one's going to know if you don't ask. And we have systems in place. We have a caring team. We have all these things that can help you. You are worthy of taking up space. You are worthy of being helped. You do not have to do this alone.